Cool. And then let me share my screen. All right. Can everybody see this just fine? Okay, cool. In that case, let's get started. So, thanks everyone for coming to my week 3 presentation on the buy-side fundamentals. Um, the first thing we'll be talking about is a brief overview of the hierarchy, and then we'll go into an invest walkthrough. So here at the very top level, we have the networks, which just represent any client of ours that has both advertisers and publishers under their wing. But of course, we'll be focusing on advertisers today since it's the buy side. Things that can be created at the advertiser level are segment pixels. So these are just going to be pixels that you can apply to a creative, and whenever a user has that creative load, then they'll be placed in like a seg or they'll collect information on them, like their browsing habits, that sort of thing, and then it'll group them into a segment, which can be useful if they want to retarget those segments later. Another thing that can be instituted here is something we'll be seeing a lot is the third party creative pixel. And this is just if they want to send any information to third parties, or if they want to I believe like there's something called like an ad verification process, that sort of thing. They can do so with this pixel. So underneath the network, we have the actual advertiser. Oh, it looks like is Elizabeth still there? Because I see like a little like warning sign on her. I don't know
Yeah,
if
I see it too. It's like in and out, I guess.
okay. I don't know if I should wait, if I should just keep going. Oh, okay. Looks like she's back. Okay, cool. Then let's keep trucking along. So, like I mentioned, underneath the network, you have the advertiser. Um, like just like with the sell side hierarchy, these relationships are a one to many. So there's going to be many networks to one, sorry, many advertisers to one network, and so on. Things that the advertiser can create at their level are conversion pixels. So these are just pixels that will track wanted behaviors from the user. So you can set it to like if they put an item in their cart, or if they bought something from the advertisement after clicking on it, or even if they added their payment information. We'll go into more detail on that when we go through the invest walkthrough. They can also make the actual creative, which is the advertisement. Of note, in the creative level, they can create. Oh, sorry. They can create the third-party creative pixels. And they can also create it at the advertiser level as well. Okay. And then another thing they can do is that they can also create their own segment pixels. And then if they have any advertisements that are being held in a third-party ad server, so third-party creatives, is what the term for them, they can implement a click tracker and an impression tracker. Since of course the advertisement's not being held at one of our ad servers, it's useful to implement these things so that they can keep track of how many times the ad's been clicked or how many impressions they've served. Underneath the advertiser, we have the insertion order. Oh. So this just represents a financial agreement between the advertiser and the network regarding how they're going to be delivering creatives. And as mentioned before, there are many insertion orders to one advertiser. And the final thing is the line item, which represents the strategy for a group of creatives and how they're going to, sorry, and how they're going to serve them to various publishers. I believe that is it for the hierarchy, unless anyone has any questions before moving on.
Sure. I'll ask you a question. Also, my video is awesome. I think I have bad connection. What would be a reason to use a third-party pixel?
I believe it's like if you want to send the information to a third party, or if you want to, I think another use for it is perform ad verification. I saw that. I'm not sure if there are other use cases though.
Yeah, a lot of third-party pixels will track like specific extra information
Hmm.
on, I guess, user, etc. So depending what the advertiser wants to track, they'll use a third party to get the specific information they need.
Okay. Okay, that's super good to know. Thank you.
Yeah. And that's it for questions on this one, unless anyone
Okay.
else wants to ask a question.
All right, cool. So I guess we can go ahead and move on to the invest walkthrough. I'm just going to go ahead and pull up the test network, 958. Quick switch in. And let's go to all advertisers. And I've created a test advertiser that we can walk through today. Let's just go ahead and hit edit so we can see the process of making one. Okay, so as you can see here, you can name your advertiser. You can add an external code if, for external purposes, if you want to add a separate code for tracking. So you can set the state to active or inactive. You can set the time zone. This will actually matter a bit more when we talk about pacing. Time format, so you can set if you want it the normal AM or PM or military time. I believe this is personal preference. I'm actually not sure if it impacts anything directly. Currency, I have it set to the USD, but you can set it to any currency you want. And then political advertising, this is pretty important. This is something you should just declare if whether or not you're going to be running any political advertisements on your platform. Um, I believe the audit will uncover this anyway. I mean, I don't know why you would lie at this particular stage, but if you would, I'm pretty sure the audit would flag your creatives as political if they were. So if we want to move down here to the advanced settings, you can set frequency and recency caps here. It's not really recommended, as with the sell side, anything that you apply on higher levels will then apply onto the lower level. So if I set frequency and recency caps here at the network level, at the advertiser level, then that's going to apply to every single insertion order and every single line item. So it's probably not wise to apply it here. Teams, so I can add teams onto this if I want to allow them to edit these settings. Reporting labels, I believe you can declare, like salesperson, account manager, advertiser type. I believe this just makes it easier to pull up reporting. Billing information, if I had any custom billing information, I could implement that here. And then brand settings. So these are, sorry, this first one here is competitive exclusion. So if I didn't want my creatives to appear alongside a competing advertiser, say I'm Coca-Cola and I don't want my advertisements to appear alongside a Pepsi ad, I could go ahead and declare that here. Default creative brand. So if I was already like an established brand, I could declare that here. So again, let's go with the previous example, Coca-Cola. And then I could select the default offer category here. I believe this is probably already selected because Coca-Cola is already associated with food and drink. So yeah, I guess any questions before we move out of this section?
No, none for me.
Cool. Just go ahead and hit save. So now let's get into the next level, which is insertion orders. Trying to see how I can, sorry, there we go. I think the windows, okay. Actually, we'll do it this way. Don't know, okay, there we go. Sorry about that. Okay, cool. So as you can see here, you can set up a name for the associated insertion order, set up external external codes or billing codes, set the status again, active, inactive. Currency, I believe since this has already been applied at the advertiser level, you can't change it. Viewability standard. So what this refers to is if I wanted to charge on a a VCP milli basis, I would have to choose what I consider as a viewability. Here, I just have it set to the, I believe IBA stands for Internet Advertiser Bureau. And their standard is for a banner ad, 50% of the pixels are in view for 1 continuous second. And for a video, 50% of the pixels are in view for 2 continuous seconds. So yeah, but I believe that only really matters with VCPM pricing. Teams. So again, if I wanted to implement any teams to help me edit this, budget type. So I have it set to revenue. which means that I have a budget of $50,000. But if I had set it to impression, that means that I want to reach 50,000 impressions to use the same number. Here's where I could set the billing period. So it starts today, and I've set it for the 25th. Oh, whoa, sorry about that. And then here's where I can apply an external code if I wish for tracking purposes. And then I could add another billing period if I wish. I could also hypothetically set it to a limited budget if I only wanted to apply budgets at the line item level, but I suppose that's a matter of personal preference. Pacing, we'll talk about this a bit more when we get into line items, but essentially pacing means I can control how fast I want or not how fast, but how I want to pace the budget. So if I want to spend more early on and then less later, or vice versa, I could do so here. But there's a better visual representation in the line item section, so I'll go over it then. Supply strategy, so I can choose the inventory type. The three categories I believe are app, web, and app and web. Block list, so this is if I wanted to completely ban certain publishers, or sorry, if I wanted to block my creators from appearing on certain publishers. Of note, the Xandr block list is there by default and cannot be changed. That's just, the price of doing business with us. But if I wanted to institute additional block lists, I could do so here, and I could also do it at the line item level. And the allow list is, the inverse. It's just any publisher I do want to appear on. I could set frequency and recency caps here. It might be a good idea to do an insertion order level, but since you can also apply them at the line item level, it's probably better to do them there. Reporting labels, again, this sort of just makes reporting easier. Commissions, I believe this is like if you need to pay fees to like a third party, you could list them here, but as you can see here, it looks like it's about to be, depreciated. Associated line item, so I'll have a line item associated, and we'll go over that in a minute. And then comments here is just if you wanted to add any particular comments about this insertion order. I guess any questions before we move on to line items?
Yeah, could you give me a reason why you'd want to set a frequency cap?
At this level, or just in general?
In general?
Yeah, I believe it helps out with ad fatigue, right? So if a user sees a particular advertisement many times in a day, like it might just result in a poor user experience and make them really like have a negative view on your product. So it's probably a good idea to at least pace it out to make it like, I don't know, once per day or once per 12 hours or something along those lines.
Yeah, and then if you do see there's a frequency cap applied, but they're not pacing well, then you could recommend to turn it off because then you want to get more impressions. The person might see the ad more.
Right, yeah. Okay, cool. That makes sense. Any other
That's it
questions? Okay.
not for me, yeah.
Okay, so let's get into the line items. Should have one here. Sorry. Gosh. There it is. So as mentioned before, this is where you're going to be executing the specific strategy for a group of creatives. So here you can create a name, apply a code, set the state, active, inactive. Here's where you can associate a specific insertion order, which I did, the insertion order that I was talking about earlier. I can declare the ad types here. So banner, video, and audio are all pretty self-explanatory. Native, I believe, refers to an advertisement that sort of takes on the characteristics of whatever publisher website it's on to make it appear like it's more part of their content. I don't think we really covered incrementality, but the budget type here is, since we set it at the insertion order level, it's revenue, so it just lets us know that. And then here's where we can do budgeting stuff. So revenue types, cost per millis, cost per 1,000 impressions, CPCs, cost per click. So this will only it will only pay them if the ad gets clicked. Dynamic CPM. So this is if I'm okay with my bids being above or below an amount, but as long as it sort of averages out. So if I wanted an average CPM of 10, like I could put a minimum of 1 and a maximum of 10, with the hope that eventually it'll average out to 5. Viewable CPM, so this is like I mentioned earlier with that viewability standard. If it does meet that standard, then I will pay out for the impression. If not, then I believe you won't. And then cost plus, I believe this is like the most common one because it's a good way for networks to ensure that they're getting money. If I set a margin here, I believe what happens is they're essentially guaranteed that percent margin of the budget that I'm setting here. So yeah, for now though, for simplicity's sake, we'll just set it at a CPM of 5. Payment model, and since I set it at CPM, it's just you will pay per impression. Here's where we can set budgets and like specific flights. So you can see here I have a start date of today to the 19th, and the budget here will be 30,000. Here's where I can set the pacing. So this is what I mentioned earlier. If I wanted it to spend more earlier on, I could increase the number above 100. If I wanted to spend less earlier on, I could put the number below 100. And I believe the range is 50 to 150. But for now, I'll just put it at 100. And then daily budget would be if I want to spend a very specific amount each day. But I believe setting the pacing to 100 already evenly distributes it. Let's see here. So now underspend catch up. So what this means is that if I underdelivered on a particular day, what strategy do I want to take to make up for that? I could spread it out evenly. So whatever that amount was, I could spread it out through the rest of the campaign and try to spend that way. Or if I choose ASAP, what it'll do is it will try to make up for that as soon as possible, even on the next possible day, to try to meet that budget requirement. Day part. So this is if I wanted my impressions to serve at specific times or during the day or week. So you can see here, like I only want my advertisements to show from 4 a.m. to 4 p.m. Monday through Saturday, right? And there's 2 settings for that. So you can specify a specific time zone. So if I was targeting like the East Coast, right, I would do US Eastern and base it on that. Or I can use I can use the browser settings of the user. The little tricky thing here is, and something to keep in mind, is if you do this, it might interfere with your pacing. So that's just something to be aware of. Daily pacing
Yeah,
application. Oh, sorry.
one thing to add for that
Mhm.
is if you do have the day parting and you're the client and you're checking how it's doing, you
Mhm.
to make sure you're checking it for that time zone, or else you're going to think like, oh, why is it spending or delivering outside of it? I
Mhm.
actually had a case where somebody was looking in the wrong time zone, and that was really all that was wrong.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Yeah, I figured it can get a little weird with that, but good to know. Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, so daily pacing allocation, cool. So daily pacing allocation is I want to spend my budget evenly throughout the day. Um, but ASAP would mean I want to spend more as soon as possible. But I believe, yeah, as it mentions here, overspending is more likely to occur since you're spending a lot of your budget earlier in the day. Maybe it doesn't update in time and thinks you have more budget than you have. So if overspending is a concern, it's recommended you leave it evenly. Hourly pacing override. So I believe this is if you want to, like set, I want my ad to show up 40% of the time at 11 a.m. and 60% of the time to show up at 12 p.m. You can set that here and you can choose if you want it within a date range or on a specific day of the week. Okay, so then here, budget overview. So as you can see here, it has the 2 flights and these gray bars, which represent the expected budget to be spent that day. If to give a demonstration of the pacing, if I set this to 120, right, you can see here that more budget will be spent earlier in the campaign and then it will taper off as it continues. But for now, let's just go back to 100. Something to note here is if this was an active campaign, then we would see blue bars depending on, how much of the budget was actually delivered. Ideally, you want, the delivered budget and the expected budget to be the same, but if it's showing as under overperforming, then that's where these settings would help you out. Optimization. I believe this is going to be like its own thing, but I do know that for goal priority, there's 3 categories as you can see here: delivery, performance, and margin. So delivery means I want to focus on getting as many impressions as possible. And as it mentions here, like you could end up having a negative margin or overspending if you choose this because it will just focus on getting as many impressions as possible. Performance, this just means like I want to adhere to my goals as closely as I can. And margin means that I want to secure a specific margin for the network. But if you already had selected cost plus as a method up here, I believe then you cannot choose this since you're guaranteeing them a margin. So for now, let's just do performance. And then conversion pixels, this is where you can associate conversion pixels. We'll talk about that a bit more when we talk about pixels. So inventory and brand safety targeting. Here's where I can choose my supply source, right? If I wanted open exchange, which just means the open marketplace, if I wanted to only make this part of a deal, or if I only wanted to sell my inventory to managed publishers, I could do so here. Let's just leave it on the open exchange for now. I could choose the inventory type. So again, here are these three options: app and web, app only, web only. I could institute block lists at this level and allow lists. Of course, the Xandr block list has already been applied. And if I had applied any block list at the insertion order level, that would also be applied here. Brand safety segments. So this is if you want to pay a third party to absolutely ensure that your ad doesn't show up on, or is very unlikely to show up on certain pages with certain attributes. So I believe, like you could see here, with like don't show or make sure not to show any of my creatives on pages with unknown age ratings, for example. This is just like a brand safety thing if you want to make sure that you're not associated with a certain category. And then advanced targeting, if you know that certain exchanges are better for you or worse for you, you can go ahead and allow or disallow them here. Geography, so now we can go into targeting. You can target them by their geography, so that could be any as broad as a country or as specific as a zip code if you want. Cross device, so this is a neat additional feature you can pay for that essentially makes it so the user is being tracked on all of their potential devices. So if they have like a phone and a laptop and a CTV, right, it's going to see them as the same user for all three of those devices. Of course, that costs a little extra though. And then for segments, so this is where you can institute either your own segments that you have through segment pixels, Xandr's like pre-made segments, or third-party segments that are curated by third-party data providers. But of note, if you use these segments, then of course that's going to cost money. And something to note here is something called Boolean logic when it comes to segments. So let's take a couple as an example and just toss them in. So if I have it set to and within segments, what that means is I want a person that either, because or separates these two, falls into the travel and electronics segment, or falls into the computers and apparel segment. It has to be basically one of these two combinations. If I did or, then that means that I'm okay with someone being travel or electronics, but they also need to be computers or apparel. Of note, if you have too many and statements in general, those are going to be more restrictive since it's making the target audience much narrower. So that could be a reason why a client is under delivering if they have just way too many and statements. So yeah. Here's where you can apply frequency and recency caps. This is probably one of the better places to do it since, you know, it's going to be a group of creatives and you can just apply those caps to all those creatives. Demographics, I believe, doesn't really serve much of a purpose if you're already going to be using segments. Moving on to viewability and environment targeting. So I can choose if I want to only buy impressions with percentage or a certain percentage of predicted viewability, which I believe is just based on historical information. Of note, though, again, like the higher I make this predicted viewability, like if I put it at 80%, the higher chance that I likely will underdeliver. Device type, so I can say which devices I want my advertisements to appear on: desktops, tablets, mobiles, and CTVs, or I could exclude them if I wish. System, so I could actually choose specific OSs either to allow or disallow, specific browsers as well, specific languages, or even device models. And then page property. So this just means where in the page I want my advertisement to likely appear. And if I have all three checked, that means it's, you know, it can show up anywhere. So let's see, creative rotation. So this is if I wanted to, I guess, put a thumb on the scale on how often I want the creatives to rotate in and out. So if I wanted to evenly weigh them. So let's say I had three creatives under this line item. If I said evenly create, then each of them will show up approximately 33% of the time. If I wanted to assign weights myself, I could do that. So I could say I want this one to show up 40% of the time, and I want this one to show up 30% of the time, and the other one to also show up 30% of the time. Or I could do auto optimize, which I'm not sure which metrics they base it on, but I have to assume either like viewability or conversion is probably what they would base that on. But then it would show the ads that perform better more often. You can associate creative, so I've already associated a creative here that I'll go into in more detail later on. Or if I had like a specific creative idea, I could add it that way as well. And you can see here the associated creative. We didn't talk about measurements too much, but programmable splits. So this is this is an interesting one. So let's basically this allows the advertiser to say, okay, we want to target, for example, here, right? I have New York and New Jersey the most. So I want to spend 50% of my budget on New York and 40% of my budget on New Jersey. It also allows you to do other things as well, like you could do countries, you could do specific segments, that sort of thing, just depending on your needs. And you can also use a bid multiplier. What that means is if I really want impressions to serve in New York, I could say I'm willing to bid 2 times higher. So since my average CPM was 5, I'm willing to bet up to 10 CPM for impressions in New York. So that splits, and then fees. So you can, again, if you need to pay any third parties, you can declare so here. And then you can add more reporting labels and comments at the end of the line item. Any questions before we move on?
None for me.
Cool. All right. So then in that case, let's go to creatives. Okay, so as you can see here, I have a creative set up. Trying to see, oh, hang on, I think there we go. Cool, so as you can see here, I just have a basic Coke ad here. You can set the name. Oh, shoot, my bad. You can set the landing page. So you can do that here or actually at the line item level. The landing page just means like whatever whenever you click on this creative or in the line item, those group of creatives, it'll direct you to a specific URL. As you can see here, creative banner properties. So you can do the specific categories here. You can create like a custom size. Click track test. I believe this just means like if it's just testing to make sure. Oh, sorry. There's testing to make sure that if you click on the advertisement, it will take you to the landing page. You can apply frequency and recent caps even at the creative level. So perhaps you would want to do so here, like if you want one creative to show up either more or less often than other creatives in a line item level. You can apply the third-party pixels we talked about earlier here. You can apply segment pixels as well. And then ad choices. I'm honestly not too sure what this setting does, but you can apply it here.
The ad choices just means that when you see the ad like in the corner, it will say ad choices and it will like basically just read you your rights to the ad.
Oh, okay. Like I like in terms of like information, you mean?
Yeah, like you have that's a good way to I just feel like in general you can sometimes see if there are ad choices. You would just click on it and like see that this ad is like tracking your like impressions or whatever, like that you have the choice to see like what's going on. Maybe someone can describe it better, but it will show up on the ad as ad choices or it won't say ad choices. It's just like a little logo is going to appear.
Okay, so it's like a transparency thing, I guess.
Yeah.
Cool, cool. Thank you. So line items, here's where you can associate if you want it to be associated to a specific line item, which I have set up. Competitive exclusions, so you can introduce competitive exclusions here again. And here I have set up a competitive exclusion of Pepsi because I don't want this ad in particular, which is a Coke ad, to appear alongside that. And then creative quality. So You can do a platform audit, which means Xandr will audit your ad. Of course, that costs money. The 2 hour audit is more expensive, but it's faster, and the 1 day audit is only $1. But of course, that will take 1 day. Self audit, this is if you wanted to audit it yourself or like declare it yourself, but this isn't very popular, and no audit is not a good idea because it'll limit the amount of inventory you can target. There's very little publishers that are willing to allow a no audit advertisement onto their platform. But for now, for simplicity's sake, we'll just leave it at no audit.
And would you know a reason why you would want to have the platform audit since it does cost money to use it, but why would you choose it over the self audit?
Because it's more trusted. So unless you have like a deal of max trust with a publisher, like perhaps if you're both managed by the same network, if you want to make sure your advertisements are showing onto third-party publishers, it's more often better to just have that to have the platform audit so that way they can, take you more at your word, if that makes sense.
Yeah, yeah. Since I recently ran into an issue where a creative, the line wasn't delivering, and it's because they had a deal and the creative was they were only doing the self audit, but the deal that they were running, that inventory didn't allow the self audit. They didn't have max trust enabled. So they would, in that case, need to pay for platform audit if they did want to run on that deal's inventory.
Yeah, that makes sense. Okay, interesting. So, yeah, right, because you can set different levels of trust for deals. Okay, yeah, that makes sense. Thank you.
Yeah.
Okie dokie. So I guess let's move on to pixels. So here's where you can set up the segment pixels. I talked about these sort of segments earlier. You can make a new one if you wish. You can enter the name and external code for tracking. Pixel query string. And I actually don't know the difference between a pixel and a query string. Would you happen to know that?
I think that it would be a pixel, not, I don't know why you would use a query string.
Okay. Okay, cool. So you would just
Yeah,
set it to
yeah, I haven't
pixel.
seen that. Yeah, it
Okay.
would be a pixel. Yeah.
Cool, cool. And then you can choose how long you want the user to be remaining in the segment. So the maximum is 180, or you can choose a different time if you wish, as long as it's less than 180 days. But if the user, does a behavior that triggers again, then I believe the duration will be refreshed. And then piggyback pixels, this is if you wanted to send information to a third party from here. So that's segment pixels. Let's go to conversion pixels. So here you can see you can set a name, set an external code. You can choose how you want the conversion pixel to be triggered. So if it's just on a view or just on a click, you can choose the actual criteria. So you can see here like visit landing page, add the card, add payment info, all that stuff. For now, we'll just say like, I don't know, initiate checkout. You can choose like with the other pixel, like when do you want the information to expire? So after 14 days or 14 hours or whichever one you wish. Repeat conversion. So this is how you want to track users that convert more than once. So you can say I want to count only one conversion per user. So even if they did, the action multiple times, they would only within the time period, it would only count it once. You can count all conversions. So if they have purchased, if they clicked on your ad and they purchased something 5 times, it's going to count it 5 times. And then you can say, you can actually just put a time limit. So I only want one conversion every like 4 days. And then you can also add a piggyback pixel here if you wish. And then the last type of pixel, which kind of combines the last two that we talked about, is called the universal pixel. Essentially, what this does is it acts as both the segment and the conversion pixel, which makes it a lot easier for advertisements to keep track of this information since they don't need to set up individual segment pixels or individual conversion pixels really anymore. They can just have it all housed in the universal pixel, which is super neat. So I believe that covers pixels. Oh, there's also, of course, you can set up the third-party pixel here. I believe that covers pixels, unless there was something I missed or if there's any questions.
I think you got it.
Cool, cool. So let's go ahead and we'll talk about deals real quick. So you can't make deals here, I believe. You can only make that on the sell side, but you can view active deals and see how they're performing under this tab here. As you can see, you can see the status, the impressions matched, all that stuff. And then not planning, sorry. I meant to click reporting. So here's where you can pull up reports similar to the sell side. There's many different types of reports to pull up here. You can do it at either the member or the advertiser level. So let's just say we want to do it on the advertiser level. And I believe the two most important reports are the analytics report. So this is similar to last week when I mentioned the sell side level. It's just a lot of the common metrics for just buy side information. You can see here there's a lot of filters and a lot of dimensions. So the metrics are essentially what you want to be measuring. The filters are, for example, if you want to choose specific publishers that you want to look at, and the dimensions are, so say I chose like 3 publishers, but I didn't want to just see a lump sum of all 3 of the publishers. I wanted to see each publisher individually. I could go here and click publisher to make sure that I'm seeing different categories for each of the publishers. And I believe the other most important report here is the site domain performance. So this just means like how many times I believe an impression has been served on particular domains. And that might be useful for saying like, well, we don't want our advertisement showing on this domain as much. Maybe we should add them to a block list, for example. I believe that's reporting, unless we have any questions before moving on.
No, I think you got it. And I think so, like when you do your APIs week, one thing that I actually use a lot with like queries is I'll pull up the domains that are serving. So sometimes there will be an even faster way to check on the domains than going into the reporting itself.
Oh, okay. Thank you. Keeping me ahead of the curve. I
Yeah.
appreciate that. Okay, so I believe the last thing to talk about in this page is going to be the member settings. So if we go here, we can see there's a safety budget of 10,000. I believe this is the limit of how much you can spend in a day for the entire network. I believe this is low, but that's just because this is a test network, so that's fine. And then these are emails of people who need to be contacted in case, I guess, certain problems arise or that sort of thing. Here's where you can institute those third-party pixels at the network level if you wish. And then over here, you can see there's the objects limit report. So you can only create a certain number of objects per network. That, of course, that depends on various factors. In this case, the object limit is 9,000, and we're actually kind of approaching it. So I believe if a network is approaching the object limit, they'll receive a notice from us saying like, hey, you're approaching your object limit. Make sure you delete some of your more outdated objects so you don't run out of room. And then here you can see the creative limit, which is similar but for creative. So here's a creative limit of 10,000, but it looks like we're not approaching that limit yet, so no problems there. And then here's where you could also choose to institute geographical targeting at the network level. But of course, this will be really restrictive. If you institute that here, then it's going to apply to everything below it. And I believe, unless I missed anything, please jump in if I did, that should cover the investment walkthrough.
And did you go through planning at all?
Planning, I
The
don't.
planning tab?
Oh, wait, yes, we
I'll
did.
just
Sorry. No. That is good to point out. Oh, I don't want to do that. Yeah, so I believe here is where you can see like you can see here the targeting dimensions, and this will just show you I guess like how much you're narrowing your audience, right? So like if you're viewing the exchange, it's pretty broad, but if you only doing a banner type, that's going to limit, I guess, how many impressions you can get. Also here too, there's a more concrete example, like if you do Japan, all of a sudden, um, you've narrowed it a lot. Uh, and then I guess these two are broad enough that it doesn't impact it at all. Um, is there, I guess, I'm not sure if there's anything else though, if you can see besides that here.
Yeah, just like in general that you would want to use it before setting up a line item just to forecast if what settings you want are actually likely. Are you likely to hit your goal or deliver the amount of impressions in that day? Or like
Oh, that's
that,
right. Yeah, yeah,
whatever your target is, or if you want to like add a new restriction or something to the line item, you could test it in the planning tool ahead of time to see if you'd be able, if it was likely that you could meet the goal that you wanted.
Oh, okay. Oh, well, that makes sense. That's why it's a plan, right? So yeah, so you could, I guess, you forecast it through this and then see if it's a good idea. And then I believe, yeah, you can actually just create a line item from here using these if you wanted to.
Mhm.
Cool, good to know. Thank you.
Yeah.
Was there anything else or
Nothing from me. I don't know if anyone else has questions. I think you covered everything really well.
thank you. I guess in that case, if no one has questions, then we can, I guess, wrap this up a little early. Let's see, let me end the recording.